GoSoutheastern.com.
Exclusive.
Welcome to The Total Athlete, a bi-weekly feature here on GoSoutheastern.com. Last time we visited about student-athletes' perceptions of themselves, the inner demons they face, such as fear, anger, compulsion, and how they manifest themselves on the playing field. Today we're going to address emotional intelligence. I'm joined by Ed First. Ed is a licensed marriage and family counselor, a licensed professional counselor, and a certified sports counselor. And he works here at Southeastern in Student Support Services, volunteering his time to be with us today. Ed, we appreciate it as always. Good to see you.
It's good to be here.
We need to get this disclaimer in. We want to be very clear that this discussion is purely educational in nature. It's not a substitute for counseling. And we encourage anyone who wants to talk about their personal emotions to seek professional help. So Ed, let's start talking about this idea of emotional intelligence. Specific to athletes, what do you mean by emotional intelligence?
Yeah. So today I want to talk about two main domains of emotional intelligence. One has to do with character, or the maintaining of self-control emotionally out there on the football field or on the basketball court or wherever, as it relates to reacting, overreacting, or underreacting to officials, teammates, coaches, and in game-like situations. And then the second part has to do with the athlete's ability to perform at peak levels under pressure and in the clutch.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, it seems like you're kind of saying that if you have two athletes with the exact same physical ability, they might have very different abilities in competition because of how they've trained their brains.
Luke, that's exactly what I'm saying. I'm saying that we've spent a lot of time training the skill level of athletes, but you can have two athletes that have the same skill level, the same physical ability, and the athlete that's more emotionally mature or more able to manage his emotions in the clutch is going to perform better. That's
interesting. That the athlete that pops into my head is Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan, a guy who was cut by his high school basketball team, didn't even make the team, goes on to be considered one of the greatest basketball players of all time. Much has been written about Jordan's mental edge over other athletes and how he trained and then turned that into a performance on the field. The flip side of that in the NBA might be maybe Rasheed Wallace, Kevin Garnett, even Ron Artest, who went in the stands, who let their emotions affect their play and maybe some would consider emotionally immature.
Right. I totally agree. And when you look at those athletes, that's what separates the men from the boys and the ladies from the girls. How do they handle their poise, and how poised are they under pressure?
Well, what can you tell us about how our brains work during competition?
Okay, so what I'd like to talk about today is the limbic system. And inside the limbic system, you have the amygdala, the hippocampus, and the thalamus. And those are the main parts of the brain we want to address today.
All right, let's start with the limbic system.
Okay, the limbic system is kind of a catch-all in the sense that it has many functions in the body. It encounters the mechanisms of aggression, hate, fear, love, athletic, what we call reflex arcs, those self-preservation commands that trigger instant, oftentimes involuntary, and visceral reactions when an athlete really doesn't have time to think about what they're doing, but they're just going to have to emotionally react.
How about the amygdala?
Yeah, the amygdala is kind of more of the alarm system, and the way I look at the alarm system as far as that goes is there are certain types of emotionally charged experiences that are either threatening to the athlete, and immediately the athlete has to decide whether it's going to be involved in a fight or a flight response. And sometimes the athlete can even freeze, but there are places where both those responses are necessary. I think of an athlete, say a punt returner catching that football as it's coming down and the defenders are screaming to tear his head off. The first reaction would be a flight response to get the heck out of the way. The second reaction would be an aggressive fight response to get up that field and put a shoulder into somebody or get out of bounds or find daylight.
Very good. Next up is another part of the brain, the hippocampus.
Yeah, the hippocampus is valuable in the sense that it's right next to the alarm system, the amygdala, and what it does is it stores those short-term emotional memories that can kind of, say, freak out a quarterback for a little while. Say, for example, he's going back to pass and a big tight end like Too Tall Ed Jones, who used to play for the Cowboys, comes in, super huge guy, reaches his arms up high, blocks the pass. That quarterback will store in his mind the very next time that there was a tall guy, it was too tall, Ed, and I'm going to see him coming, and I'm going to make the adjustment for the next play, and therefore I'll get around him.
Now, I bet you've been called too tall, Ed, from time to time. The last one we're going to talk about is the thalamus, another part of the brain.
Yeah, and the thalamus is really kind of sneaky in the sense that what it usually does is it sends information that comes in through our eyes, through our stimulus, our auditory. It sends it usually to the refined cortical parts of our brain, the more thinking parts of our brain that take more time to digest and think about things. Unfortunately, in sports, though, many things happen instantaneously. And so what happens is the thalamus, if something's super emotionally charged and threatening, or an athlete has to make a quick decision, it doesn't get sent to the cortex. It gets sent right to the amygdala, and all of a sudden you have a fight or flight response to what's happening. So it's very important to train the emotional part of the brain.
And you're saying we can train our brains just like we train our bodies for competition.
Yes, we can, and the way you need to look at it like this is where emotionally charged experiences occur with athletes, neurochemicals fire in our brains, and wherever those neurochemicals are firing, that's where our brain circuitry is wiring. And so because of that, what we want to do is we want to simulate game-like situations that give athletes a chance to practice what they're actually going to be doing during competition. In basketball, it might be learning to make free throws with less than a minute left and keeping track of the score, or making a shot with under 5 seconds left. In football, it might be the 2-minute offense, learning how to make plays under pressure and competition in the last 2 minutes, simulating the clock exactly like you would in a game, so the athletes have game-like practice experiences.
Very good. So if someone watching today wants to take one thing, you got one thing to emphasize here, Ed, what would it be?
Yeah, and I think, Luke, you and I are both really saying the same thing, that the thing that we need to look at here is it's one thing to train the skill set of athletes, but there's an art in training the emotional center of an athlete. There's an art in getting to know what the athlete's feelings are going on, the doubts, the fears, the angst that's going on inside that athlete's mind. And what we want to do is we want to train their emotional center, because remember, confidence and competence, it's a result of forming healthy and effective neural brain circuitry.
All right, so you truly can train your brain. Truly, perfect practice does make perfect, and the more intense you are in your practices, the easier it is to translate to that same intensity in a game situation.
Absolutely.
For Ed First, I'm Luke Willman. Thanks for joining us here on The Total Athlete. We'll be back in 2 weeks for the very latest in for the very latest in Southeastern athletics. Visit GoSoutheastern.com.